everyone and welcome to this March bullet journal plan with me video. Today we are creating this light and cute theme that I wanted to have a romantic vintage spring feel to it. We are drawing some tulips, butterflies and using colored pencils for the first time on this channel. So it's time to open up our journals from the next empty spread, and I want to show you right away this colored pencil set I bought. It's by Tombow, which first of all, didn't know they make colored pencils, and I think the colors in these sets were so pretty, and they come in these adorable bookcases which make storing the pens really easy. I was so excited about these. However, there were a few colors missing from these collections that I needed, so I used some brush pens whenever I had to. But enough about that, and let's get started with the March cover spread that will have this almost scrapbook style with a window design, some papers and drawn decorations. We're starting with the window here, and this is definitely one of those spreads where you don't have to do all the steps I'm gonna do here, so you could just pick and choose a few different elements if doing all of it doesn't feel possible for you. But I sketched out the whole window with a pencil, and I'll show you a picture that inspired me to this specific style of window. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the name of the original creator, so if you happen to know them, please let us know in the comments. But after this sketch, I took out some brownish colors and started to color this window frame. So there wasn't a dark brown or any darker gray shade in these pencil collections. So I was kind of stuck with this pretty light brown color. I actually deepened the color a little bit later with a brown brush pen. But anyway, we are just gonna add a light layer of color and then outline this whole window design with a thin black pen. I think outlining the decorations is an especially good idea when you're working with some lighter shades because it really helps to make them stand out. Then I took out my trusty paper knife that we're gonna use to cut this window, and you can see how I only cut the center, the bottom line, and then the arc shape, but we are not cutting the vertical lines on the sides of the window. I also removed all the white spaces inside of the window, and after that we have this very cute window thingy that opens up and that leaves a lot of room for different ways to use it. I decided to add some tracing paper behind the window panels to create this almost frosty glass appearance, and then we're gonna draw some very quick flowers to this window box. I decided to go with yellow tulips as the main flower this month, so that's what we're gonna do here. I feel like I use yellow pretty rarely in my videos for some reason, but it's such an appropriate color for spring that I wanted to give it a moment this month. Also, these flowers are so small that they don't need to be anything special. I think it only took me maybe 5 minutes to draw these, and I think they still do the job. Something I realized when working with the colored pencils is that you definitely need to use some darker tones. They feel quite dry and light compared to many other coloring methods that I use more regularly, so it was definitely a learning curve for me this month to get the colors to show up as well as I wanted. But after cutting out the flowers and attaching them below the window, we can now start to work on the background. If you want, you could just leave out this step and just have this open window on both of these spreads, but I wanted to be able to use this area for something else on the next spread, so I actually cut out a piece of this grit paper from my notebook therapy Hinoki journal, which has 3 different types of paper in it. And I use that on the other side and then glued this white paper on the opposite side that we can use to draw something behind the window frame. I didn't want to use too much time for this step because the tracing paper will pretty much blur any details. So I just wanted to add some bright colors here for the sky and some green for the ground or trees. And the goal here is just to get some nice springy colors peeking under the window. But after that's done, we can move on to the next step, and here we are drawing some individual butterflies. You could use pretty much any paper for this step that you have lying around. I happen to have these extra pieces of grid paper from some previous Dutch door pages I've created in my journals, so saving those pieces for occasions like this is a very good idea. I wanted to sketch the butterflies first with a pencil and also create some different shapes here. You can really use your imagination here and come up with some different wing patterns or shapes. And you can also get a lot of ideas by searching for different butterfly pictures on the internet. I tried to keep the colors pretty similar to the ones we used thus far, so some yellow and orange tones and a little bit of blue to add some contrast. One thing I realized here is that it's better to erase the pencil sketches if you're working with colored pencils, because at least for me, they ended up muddying the colors slightly, especially if you work with lighter tones. I also think that outlining everything with a black pen was a really good way to add some contrast here again and really make these butterflies stand out. There weren't many darker tones on the whole cover spread, so I feel like these darker black areas really help to balance things out. I cut out the butterflies out of camera and then we can start to add some finishing touches to the whole cover page design. So first I ripped out some of this scribbled paper that's from my own shop. If you don't want to buy a paper like this, I've shown how to create your own scribble paper with just a pen and paper in another video. I'll try to remember to link it in the description. However, I felt like the page still needed something, so I decided to draw some simple leaves and bricks around the window that were peeking under the butterflies and the papers. I also added a little bit of definition to some of the colors in the window and darkened the outlines a little bit, and after all that, we can finally glue the butterflies to the page and announce it ready. I wanted the butterfly wings to kind of stay up, so I only glued the middle parts to the page, and I think it added such a cute three-dimensional effect here. Then before we're finally ready to move on, I wanted to add some quick matching decorations to the left side page, and we're also gonna write the March title here. I found some leftover pieces of this light brown craft paper from my collection that I decided to use here. But it has these small pieces that made writing on it a little bit difficult. I'm using the font called American Typewriter, which I think suits this type of style very well, but the letters didn't end up looking the prettiest here because the paper wasn't as smooth as I would have liked, but it was still good enough. And the last thing here was to write the monthly calendar. And also here you can see a prime example of how I cover any small mistakes in my bullet journal. So for some reason this white pen didn't want to try on this paper. So when I tried to write on it, it created a bit of a mess. But whenever something like this happens, I often just take out an extra piece of paper and cover up the mistake. I know there were quite a few steps here, but now we are finally done with the whole cover spread, and I hope the different decorations gave you lots of ideas to use in your own journals. However, next we are gonna move on to the March monthly calendar spread, where we already have the grid paper box ready. We're gonna create some bigger tulip drawings on this spread, which are gonna frame the boxes in the middle. But before that, I decided to add just a few small pieces of the same scribble paper here and there to add a bit of texture and color. I was honestly a little bit worried at this point that the grid paper would look too yellow against the notebook paper, but it actually ended up blending very well with the rest of the spread once we start to add the yellow colors to the flowers. This brown box will be for the monthly calendar, but before we fill it in, let's first finish all the decorations, and we are starting again by sketching all the big tulips with a pencil. I think these are a great flower option for someone who wants to start learning to draw flowers. Tulips have very clean lines and minimalistic shapes, so they are quite straightforward to draw and color, which is why I highly recommend you to try it out, even if it feels like it's beyond your skill level. I followed the pencil lines with the same thin micron pen we used earlier, and also wrote out a March title to the top of the right page. I used a cursive font this time just so I could show a different font option for you, and I also used a thicker pen for this title than for the flowers. But after that, it was time to take out the colored pencils again and start the coloring. I started every part by picking a lighter base color that I used to fill the whole area, and then went over some deeper parts, folds and edges with some darker tones to create some shadows and more dimension to the shapes. I think my overall thoughts about the colored pencils are that they are very easy to control and they create quite a smooth colored appearance, definitely very suitable for any type of vintage look. They also work very well in a notebook like this because you don't need to worry about water bleeding through the paper or the pages wrinkling. And then the downsides are probably that it takes quite a long time to color one area and you need to use a little bit more power, especially if you want to get the most out of the color you're using. So I think in the end, it all comes down to your personal preference. I'm very happy to have this as a coloring option moving forward, but if I'd be lower on time or worried about my wrist, I might go for watercolors instead. As a last step, I took a slightly thicker black pen and added some darker black lines here and there to add a bit more contrast to the shadow parts. But after that, we have these beautiful flowers framing the page. Then after the decorations are done, we are next writing a simple quote here in the grid box. I wanted to go with something cute and springy, so I found this quote that says, "Blossom by blossom, spring begins." I wrote it with this quite slanted cursive font. In general, the cursive fonts I used are usually not any specific font. They are more my own handwriting, which has developed over time by using my bullet journal. But in the beginning, I recommend searching for some fonts that you really like and trying to replicate them. Then slowly you can start to modify certain letters to your own liking and start developing your own unique fonts. But anyways, now all we have left is writing out the March calendar here on the brown paper, and then we're done with this whole spread. I actually really liked how this spread turned out. It's so bright and springy, but we still have a few more to go, so let's move on. Next, we're gonna set up an overall planning spread for March, and we're starting here by lining the top and bottom edge with this green paper. The colored papers I'm using are all available to download in the free section of my shop. There's a free grid paper too if you don't happen to have any lying around. So if you have a printer and like to print stuff for your journals, I'll leave a link for you in the description. I've been doing something pretty similar for the planning pages in the past few months. So after the title, I listed the top 3 things I want to get done this month. So these are the things that are the biggest priority, and honestly, if you can get 3 important things done in a month, I already consider it a win. Then I added a few open sections here where I can write in more brainstorming style. This first section will be the March focus. So just some rows for me to get a little bit clearer about the month and what are my expectations for it. Then on the next spread, I started with this March challenge section. So this could be whichever type of challenge you want to do. Maybe you want to start a new hobby or have enough time to do something. Or this could even be an opportunity to look back to your yearly goals and pick something you haven't started yet. So the challenge itself will go on the first line here, and then I left some room for myself to write some notes about how did the challenge go for me. Then at the bottom of the page, we are creating these 2 small boxes that I wanted to line with these stamp edges. I added some green color here again, which looks especially light here on camera. And I ended up using these boxes to list some habits I want to try out or improve. And then on the right, some bad habits that I should stop doing. Then finally, let's finish this spread with some quick decorations again. And we are starting with this smaller tulip drawing in the bottom left corner. I'll speed through the pencil sketch here to save some time, but just know that I start all my drawings from a pencil sketch. I'm not confident enough drawer to just go in with unerasable pens right away. And yeah, I don't really know what to say about this anymore. I used the same colors as before and tried to balance the leaves on both sides of the flowers. And then we're gonna finish this drawing by adding a small piece of the same grid paper over the lower part. To be honest, I was pretty happy about this spread already, but I thought that we should maybe add some butterflies here again to tie everything together with the cover spread, and also to maybe add some extra color here. So I quickly drew another set of butterflies, again trying to create some different styles and designs than earlier. I drew some extra ones too that we can use in the later spreads, and I'd recommend also making some really small butterflies that can be added to any small spaces. I cut the butterflies again out of the camera and added a few to this planning spread. And now we are finally ready to move on again. Next, we're gonna set up the weekly layout for March. You know I love my Dutch door weeklies, so we're gonna start here by cutting the edges from these next 2 pages. I'll only have 1 page per week here, so if you'd like more space for each week, you could use a full spread instead and just cut more pages. But after that's done, we're gonna add some scribble paper to the background again, and then I started to test out these different paper boxes on the page. I thought there wasn't enough green here, so I decided to add some of these very simple leaves behind some of these boxes. I think in general, decorations like these are so useful because they only take a few minutes to draw, but they still completely change the look of the whole spread. Anyway, after that, it's time to write the titles and fill these 4 boxes. So I wanted this first page here to be a weekly overview, so that at the beginning of March I can take a moment and create some sort of game plan for the whole month ahead. Doing this has really helped me to prepare and plan ahead because it forces you to come up with a time frame for each task or projects you need to get done. I use it mainly for my work tasks. So for example, planning my video schedule, when I need to film and edit stuff, and also for the shop updates that take quite a bit of time behind the scenes. So I decided to leave a few rows for a general plan and then list a few of the most important tasks that need to get done in these time frames. But then let's set up the first week here on the right side together. I usually like to leave a little bit of room for each day to write any appointments or tasks that I need to get done that day. In the past few months, I've really enjoyed something between a weekly task list and daily to-do lists. I used to write a task list every day that was at least 5 things long, but recently I feel like I have a little bit better routine and I know most of the things that I need to get done without writing them down, but I still like to write down some important time-sensitive tasks, and it just helps me to know that I got everything done in time if I can cross it off from my weekly pages. But then on this right side column, I decided to list a few habits that I mark with these small icons. I didn't use a habit tracker for a long time, but I've tried to get into some new daily routines this year, and being able to add a dot in the habit tracker definitely helps to feel some sense of achievement. And then lastly, I usually like to leave some empty space for random notes or thoughts I might have throughout the month. I think the rest of the weekly pages will be quite similar, and I've also really enjoyed decorating the weekly sections a little bit further with some stickers and washi tapes throughout the month, so I might do it this time too. I always post a flip through of the used monthly themes here as a YouTube short, so on those you can see how a certain section ended up looking. But that's it for the weekly layout, and now we have one more simple spread to set up, which will be for the monthly reflection. We're starting here by adding this light green paper to the middle of the spread because I wanted to add some color here and also divide the space a little bit differently. These reflection pages are ones that I fill in at the end of the month to look back and think about what happened, check if I could keep up with the expectations and goals I set, and if there's something I need to improve moving forward. I started by drawing some quick leaves here again and then added the rest of the butterflies to the corners. But after that, I usually always start these reflection pages with the what's on my mind section, which just allows me to reflect on whatever there happens to be on my mind at the moment. Then I decided to make this list of a few different areas of my life that I'll rate from 1 to 10 based on how I felt about these things in March. This is a craft that I used to use a lot in these reflection pages maybe a few years ago, and I was reminded of this when updating the old bullet journal themes for my shop. I don't even know why I stopped doing this, because if you do this a few months in a row, it's really interesting to be able to compare different months and maybe see some patterns. But anyway, then I think it's always good to have some space to write about the things you're grateful for. And lastly, I finished this reflection spread with this favorites section where I can list some of my favorite things from the past month. I'm always amazed how much these things change in just 1 month, especially if you're someone like me who gets really into things and then keeps rotating different interests. But after that, we are done with this reflection spread, and it means that the whole March setup is done. I actually really like how this month turned out. The colors are so pretty, and even if some of the decorations were a little bit more on the simple side, I still think they created such a pretty theme that I'm just really excited to start using. We'll have some bigger paintings next month, so stay tuned for that. But I guess that's it for this time. If this was your first time around here and you'd like to stay tuned for more, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!